let's give it one last punch. I gotta stop doing that bore-out noise. It's showing me 49 miles to the gallon. 49 miles to the gallon. Good morning guys, and welcome back to SAB and welcome to another video. Now this feels a little bit like deja vu for me because I'm going back to Pro Alpha and today is the last drive at 225 horsepower. Because it's going to go back into Pro Alpha. We're going to fit an uprated clutch to the car. Pro Alpha, we're going to keep the car for a few days, do a retune, turn the power back up to the 250 mark, but also see what they can do in terms of leveling out the power graph. Now, if you haven't seen the first drive video of this car at 225 horsepower, 270 foot-pound of torque, make sure you check it out. I'll leave a little clippy thing here because it was the first time that I properly gave this car a nice little hoon, and bloody hell this thing is quick. So I'm super excited today because I'm dropping it back to the guys at Pro Alpha to do a little bit more work. But if you haven't seen this little thing hooning, then here's a quick little second gear pull joining the motorway. And I said it in the last video as well, the first drive video, that this thing just keeps on giving. The power delivery on this car is ridiculous right now. And this is 225, so right now the power really starts to kick in around the 4,000 RPM mark. And it'll pretty much do the same thing when we tune it up again back up to 250 horsepower. But I have not driven the car at 250 horsepower, so when I collect the car again at Pro Alpha, it's going to be another great little surprise for me. So in reality, it's actually been quite good that the clutch was slipping on this car, so they had to tune it back down to 225, because you guys on the channel are getting what it's like to drive this at 225, and you're going to get to see what it's like to drive at 250 horsepower. Now, as the car is going back to Pro Alpha, we're fitting a new clutch on the car. There was the option to go for just a new stock clutch on this thing, which is the one that comes standard on the Abarth, or to go for an uprated clutch. Now, based on the fact that this car is going to be pulling 250 horsepower by 280 foot-pounds of torque, probably will be fine for a little bit, but what will end up happening is I'm going to end up killing the life of that clutch. So Chris at Pro Alpha has turned around and told me, don't worry, I've got the clutch for you. It'll be an uprated clutch. It'll be the best kind of clutch for overall drivability, but also to take a little bit of punishment when I'm booting the car. So I guess now is probably an appropriate time to do a little summary or a debrief, if you like, of what it's like to drive this car at 225 horsepower and the difference between the power delivery of what I had before versus what I've got now. Now, I know I've mentioned it before on the collection day video, and it almost took me by surprise when I got in the car and I first drove it, and I was so used to changing gears around 5,000 RPM due to all the power delivery being so low down the rev range. Whereas with this one, although it's 225 horsepower, because it's a much bigger turbo and it spools up much later, I've had to get used to revving the car a lot further to make sure I'm getting the most out of the revs and the most out of the power. On something like a Garrett GT1446, you get a lot less lag on the turbo. It spools up a lot quicker, so whilst it's a slightly bit more laggy than the IHI turbo, you don't have to consciously make an effort to drive the car differently. However, there are some perks to having a laggy turbo. Now, all of you guys who own Abarth will know that the one thing that this car is really crying out for is a 6th gear. We haven't got a 6th gear in this car, which makes for motorway driving to pretty much sit around the 3,000 RPM, 2,500 RPM, and on the older turbo I was always on boost when I was on the motorway. Now, in this car, it's a slightly different scenario, because in this car, I can drive this car at 70 miles an hour on the motorway, completely off boost, which is awesome, because the instant consumption, how right it is or not, on this car, on the motorway at 70 cruising, is showing me 49 miles to the gallon. 49 miles to the gallon in a car which is like a little pocket rocket, and that for me is a brilliant thing to have, particularly if you're doing things like road trips or long drives. It means that you get a lot more fuel consumption when you don't really want to spank the car, which is awesome. One of the downsides that I've obviously come to realize on this thing now is, and like I said, you need to be conscious in the way you drive it, because one of the things, I guess, which is a little downside to having a laggier turbo is that if you're crawling down the road and you're doing, you know, 40 odd mile an hour, 50 miles an hour, and you're sitting in 5th gear or 4th gear, and you need to make an overtaking maneuver, in the older turbo, you could just punch it in the gear you're in, the boost will kick in, and off you go. In this car now, you have to consciously drop down a gear, because you put your foot to the floor, it takes a while for the turbo to spool. So I've had to get used to making sure I drop down gears before going for overtakes. But when you do drop those gears down, flip it out, it is quick. Okay, so coming off the motorway now, and the last real chance really to drive this car now at the power it's on, because there's a little stretch of road now which is national speed, and then it's town driving all the way to Pro Alpha. So let's give it one last punch. I gotta stop doing that bore out noise. This thing is going to be so bloody quick. I mean, it's quick now, but literally it's going to be rapid. So that's it, guys. Last punch really at 225. Now it's all town driving to Pro Alpha. Oh, the flutter! The flutter! See, now I'm doing 30 and I'm sitting off boost. You'll hear it properly. Listen. Flutter for days. Flutter for days. And now I've hit traffic. So guys, I think now is probably the right time to end the video. I am about 5 minutes away from Pro Alpha. I'm going to drop the car off to those guys. They'll have it for a few days. They'll retune the car, change the clutch, and the next time that we're in this thing, we will be at 250 horsepower by 280 foot-pound of torque, or maybe more. If they could tune it a little bit further, who knows? But guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video, which is pretty much my last drive of this at 225 horsepower. If you have liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. And of course, I will see you all on the next one. Thank you, bye-bye.